Okay, so call to order, Peter Eckel, Budget Advisory Committee.
Jenny Nolan, Budget Manager.
Tyson Thornburg, Budget Financial Analyst.
Kevin Ingles, Finance Director.
Shawn Lewis, City Manager.
Rita Russell, City Council.
Jay Knight, back.
Cooper, back.
Phyllis H., back.
And those online, please.
Shawn Weiske, Human Resources Director.
Tamara, Niles, City Attorney.
Great, and I think James Ferran is calling in. I did talk to Nevin the last couple of days. I assume that he'll be here. Approval of the minutes from August meeting.
Move to approve.
Second.
Those in favor to approve?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Let's move on to the department presentation. So I think, Shawn, you're up first. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. As I said, I'm Shawn Weiske, the Director of Human Resources. So just to briefly go over the outcome area and the department overview. So HR, being an internal service department, helps primarily in the area of governance. However, we do touch all of the outcome areas of the city by supporting the rest of the city, which we recognize that we are that internal services partner that really helps to keep everyone fully staffed and paid every year. So that's the HR outcome area, is primarily governance. Overview of our department. Our mission is to exhibit dynamic leadership and strategic partnership with the department leaders. And we provide the whole array of HR services, from compensation and recruitment down to employee and labor relations. This is the department structure. I am oversee 4 individuals directly, and then my HR operations manager oversees 3 individuals. Department metrics. So these numbers are as of last week. So number of positions that we have posted, both internally on our internal site as well as on external sites. Out there for recruiting is 211. We've hired 89 employees and processed that paperwork for 89 individuals so far this year. We have additionally had 42 people who have promoted, and we've processed those transactions. And then we've had 68 individuals leave the organization that we've offboarded. We've had 37 workers' comp claims that we've processed this year. And as far as class and comp goes, our career achievement reviews, which is individuals that may have gotten a new degree or a new certification or some type of educational change. We've done 84 of those this year, and that does impact individuals' pay. So that's a good thing that we're seeing people invest in themselves. And then we've done 41 job reviews this year, and these are those traditional reclassifications that you think about when you think about classification and compensation. So someone lets us know that they're not potentially working consistent with their job description. We'll do a job review, alter those job descriptions, and then if necessary, we'll adjust the level of their job as well, which could potentially impact their pay. All right, so 2024 funds return to the balance. As of now, I believe I'm going to be pretty much on par. I was fully staffed up until July of this year. And with that departure that we had in July, we're actually reallocating those funds to a third-party TPA as of right now to shore up those deficiencies in our services. So we anticipate that we are going to be spending all of our budget, but we're not going to be going over our budget is what we're anticipating. Major accomplishments. We've been busy this year. We developed a supervisory academy program, which is an in-depth 7-session training program for our supervisors. We developed a pre-supervisory academy that is rolling out next month, and those are for individuals who would like to become supervisors and to provide them with the tools to make that leap to that next stage in their career. We are developing a new performance management program right now. We are going to be going through phase 1 implementation in January of 2025. So there's been a ton of work that has been done on that front this year. We negotiated new collective bargaining agreements with our 2 unions, our EEA and EPBA. We fully implemented our class and comp system that we developed last year. The full implementation went into effect January. We reorganized the HR department, which we're still kind of in the middle of that reorg right now, but it has increased efficiencies thus far, and we are seeing some service delivery efficiencies as well with that change so far, even without it fully being implemented. We're in the process working with our city attorney's office and revising the city policy manual. Many thanks to Vicki, Tamara for all of her work in reviewing those policies. We went through those policies as well, so we know it was a massive lift, but we did it as a team and she did it as an individual. So much thanks to her assistance with that. We implemented new medical plans for our upcoming benefits year. So this includes 2 new PPO options. Over the last couple of years, we have been listening to our staff with our benefits survey that we do every year, and staff have been wanting a different option that goes outside of the Kaiser network. And so that's what we're providing this year. 2 new PPO options, and we're able to keep the costs relatively flat. For all of our medical plans, it's really just a 2.9% cost increase to the city. So a lot of hard work and negotiating went into that. We're seeing throughout the Denver metro area increases of 9-10%. So a 2.9% increase while we're actually able to enhance our benefit options is a massive lift. And I give kudos to my team for really diving into that and working with our benefits broker on that. And then we expanded the city's formal internship program this year as well. I think it was a great success. We built on kind of the pilot program that we did last year and really made it a robust program this year. So we had a lot of major accomplishments. And again, these are just the major accomplishments. We also have a lot of minor accomplishments that are not mentioned here. But I think this really is just the tip of the iceberg on those big items that we've hit. Challenges faced. I think I had this in my slides last year. Technology, IT has been great in evaluating UKG, which is our HRIS. That's where all of our personnel information is housed. They have completed a full review of our system, and we're currently in the RFP process right now of getting a third-party contractor to come in and fix the issues that we've been experiencing over the last few years. So that's really a testament to IT's partnership there. We also had some other issues with technology. Our passive benefits enrollment in 2023, which was supposed to be an easier process, because under a passive enrollment, you don't have individuals having to log in and actively make a benefit selection if they're happy with their current benefits. However, we discovered after doing the passive enrollment that our systems don't actually talk to each other like we thought they actually did. So we did run into some issues with people who wanted to just roll over what they had last year into this year, and that rollover didn't happen seamlessly. So we did have to work the first few months of this year, actually the first like 4 to 5 months of this year, cleaning that up. And so lessons learned, we are going to have a passive enrollment this year, but we have tested it this time. We thought that the way it was set up previously was fine, but we've now confirmed that it does actually work this time. And we also are making duplicative payments right now for WorkTerra and UKG Benefits Prime. That's something that hopefully will go away after we are able to optimize UKG with the assistance of IT and this third-party administrator that we are currently in the RFP process of securing right now. So hopefully that duplicative, it's about a $25,000 a year payment will cease, and we will no longer need Workterra, and we can just rely solely on UKG. I mentioned the class and comp rollout was fully completed in this year in January. One of the things that we did find is communication deficiencies, did cause some issues with employee buy-in in late 2023 and early 2024. I think we've since rectified those issues, but just wanted to, recognize that we did have that, and that was a self-inflicted wound by me and my staff not communicating as effectively as we probably should have during that entire process. So again, lessons learned, and we have, I believe, rectified those issues moving forward. And I believe that's the end.
Thank you, Director Weiske. Any questions from the group?
I think one question that maybe just didn't get asked a lot through our last year was like, is there a budgetary issue or constraint that the directors feel may be holding them back from achieving any of their goals, or is there anything budgetary in their mind that they would like to see changed, or as far as their needs or perceived needs? So, okay, great, thank you. You heard me. Perfect.
Yeah, I did. I wasn't sure if you were done asking. Yeah, from my perspective, we have found a way to absorb the cost of getting the tools that we need with that salary savings from that departure that we had earlier this year. So I plan on using some of that salary savings in the interim, as I mentioned, for a third-party administrator to come in and help us to shore up some of that work. In the interim, while that's happening, I'm simultaneously training the rest of my team to absorb those job duties. And so once they're able to effectively absorb those job duties, we're not going to need that third-party administrator anymore. And I plan on reallocating that funding then at that time, which I anticipate will probably be in the beginning of 2025, to purchase some systems that we need to help us do our work, such as a learning management system and a leave management system. We do have workers' comp that we administer, as well as the city's salary continuation and ADA accommodation leave. And right now, all of those leaves are being tracked primarily in an Excel spreadsheet. And so having a robust system would actually really help us to do our work, and we'll be able to actually reallocate those funds to purchase. So that's my long-winded way, and I apologize for being so long-winded, of saying that I personally don't feel any budget constraints as of now. I've been able to figure out internally with my existing budget, but I can't speak for the rest of the department directors.
Well, yeah, sorry, the plural was directed towards the group here, the committee, but Director, thank you for that answer. That was great. It seemed like you're very much on the ball.
I was just going to comment that I think the accomplishments were great, and the supervisory program is pretty cool that you do that here in the city. I think that's big in retaining people, and also completing the bargaining agreements with the unions. That's great. And the benefits, that's awesome for employees. And I think the biggest thing I noticed was internal promotions. I see it in my business and our work. And I think that goes a long ways in retaining people. Is there any, I know you did just mention a third-party administrator for, sounds like some of 25. Is there any hiring expected for next year, or a need for that in your department?
In my department, no. I anticipate we'll be able to maintain and enhance the services that we currently provide with some of the reallocating of the funding from that position that's been vacated. So I don't anticipate hiring anyone in from my team anytime soon, or having a need for it.
And then citywide, I noticed, I think you were over 200 on 200 count on the job postings, I believe, and you hired around 90. what is sort of the breakover and expectation for job postings to finding qualified candidates and further hiring, just to give us an idea?
Right. So just for a little bit of clarification, that number can be slightly deceiving because under Colorado law, we do have to post all promotions as well. So just because we brought in 90 or so people, you add in the promotions of those jobs that were posted as well. So just to have that context as well. So it's not just that we posted 200 and only hired 90. It's really closer to 150 or so with the postings. But to go back to your question about anticipated hiring, I believe we're always going to have some type of attrition here at the city. I don't have access for immediate numbers as to what our turnover rates are here in the city in live time. That's one of the enhancements that UKG is going to hopefully be fixed. And we'll be able to have that data on a dashboard here very shortly, hopefully. But last time I looked, it was hovering around 10%, which isn't too bad for an organization our size. So I think that we're probably going to maintain that. There has been some tightening in the labor market as far as opportunities for folks. So we may see a slight increase in applications for each position that we post, given that the economy is not where it was as far as being employee friendly as it was like in 21 and 22. So we are seeing a little bit of a tightening in the labor market where it's shifting back to employers. But I still anticipate we're probably going to be hovering around that same level of attrition, which is pretty healthy, I think, for an organization our size.
Great, thank you.
And Chair Eckel, if there's nothing else from the committee on this one, I just wanted to kind of echo some of your sentiments. One of the things that I think has gone a little unnoticed, and we probably should have done more recognition around this, is the work on the collective bargaining units, what we negotiated with them. And I think it reflects, very healthy increases that we've gotten in past years, but it is the lowest in the region at that 2%. And I think that our employees recognize that the city has been very aggressive in keeping up with salaries, thanks to the work of Shawn's department, but also really excellent negotiation work. Kevin was on that team. Shawn led that. Vicki McDermott, I think, in legal was on that team. So a really, really good group that was negotiating with our unions. Shawn, one of the things he does really well is maintain excellent relations with the presidents of those unions. And so that really helps make sure that that's a positive dialogue when they sit down to the table. And just want to thank the committee and Shawn and his leadership for that.
Wonderful, thanks.
Sure.
Anything else from the group? Thank you, Director. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And moving on, let's see here. Oh, and City Attorney Niles, you're next. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Our department overview, it's the same as it has been in the past, except this year we've added the risk manager slide, converting the risk manager from less than an FTE to a full FTE under my department this year. We are anticipating returning some funds to the fund balance this year. It's always our goal to keep our budget relatively flat, but then to improve efficiencies such that we can accomplish the same amount of work with the same or less amount of money. So we've been working toward that for the last 3 years. Of course, we have seen salaries go up, as every other department has as well, but we are anticipating a small return to the fund balance this year. Unfortunately, there are a lot of our accomplishments that we can't publicly distribute, and probably the ones that we're most proud of, they're confidential, so we can't talk about it. But here are some of the things that we have accomplished that are public. Most predominantly, we've prevailed in every formal proceeding against the city. City Council has given us some directives that we really like when it comes to litigation, meaning if the city isn't liable, then we fight it. And we don't pay out city money unless we did something wrong. So if we determine there's liability, we quickly settle the case. Otherwise, if someone wants to sue us, then we will fight it. And thankfully, we've been winning. This is the legislation numbers. I don't think I need to read all these slides to the committee, but we have been able to accomplish quite a bit. One thing that isn't on here that we just found out about is through the work of Erica Gould, who we did hire to be the full-time risk manager, who was previously the paralegal in our office after an outside or hiring process. She had been working on the CIRSA audit, CIRSA, of course, being the city's insurer, and then managing claims, negotiating settlements, refusing to pay when we don't owe anything. So CIRSA's premiums for 2025 went up an average of 12.6% for the CIRSA members. And CIRSA just notified us that our premium will likely go down 10.1%. For 2025, which is over $100,000 in savings for the city. So we feel like the risk manager's work is already paying off, and it's our goal that the risk manager salary pay for itself, so that the net change to the city will not be an increase, even though it is an additional FTE. Challenges faced. When we spend a lot of time on work that ends up not happening, or lack of ownership or responsiveness, sometimes we can see some significant liability that then we have to drop everything and work on. I would say our biggest challenges have been First Amendment auditors and just publicly proclaiming information that's not accurate, because it can be defamatory towards staff. So working through those First Amendment issues and just the contentious political climate that we face here in Inglewood. Sometimes it can be difficult for us to be vocal advocates for the city, knowing that there's definitely some people in the city that will be vocally opposed during public meetings.
And when you say like lack of ownership and responsiveness of some departments, is that like on a contract, or is that communication, or could all the above and more?
I think it's different, varying in each department, and every time it occurs, we address it and hope that it doesn't happen again. So I think it just inflates our workload and then can impact morale if it is repeated. But we do work with each department and address it, address what happened, what the law is, make sure there is a policy or procedure in place to ensure it doesn't happen again. But so far it hasn't created like a claim that we have to, or litigation that we have to fight, or a claim that we may lose and have to settle. We've been able to resolve these issues internally.
Okay, thanks.
James, is that you? Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
I'll just provide the same information that Director Weiske did at this point. We anticipate that our current budget is sufficient. As far as the city side of the city attorney's office, we've really strived to keep that budget approximately level, even though we've added software, improved our services, provided more expansive services. But so we've been able to cut in some areas, to increase where necessary to keep it approximately level. Risk management, you will see the increase for the FTE. However, I do anticipate that will end up being flat, but because this is our first year doing it, I believe there is budgeted for an increase to account for that FTE. But hopefully this time next year, I'm reporting that we're anticipating a big return to the general fund balance. But this will be our first full year for it. So we'll see how it pans out.
Great.
Thank you.
Can you provide, just for those in the group and myself, can you just provide a basic summary of what the SURSA premiums encapsulate?
It's for our property liability insurance premiums.
Okay.
So I don't have the complete itemization in front of me, but any sort of liability claim, if we cause property damage or if we have employee error and omission, those are the claims that I adjudicate versus the ones that Human Resources oversees for work comp. So these are that we hit somebody's car, we that sort of thing. That sort of liability. We did add on one line item of additional insurance as well. Premium was not significant, but that's included even with the 10% increase. We actually are increasing coverage a bit.
And any underwriting related to the city as to why our premium should be reduced in 25, or is it more of a general insurance marketplace move?
It's not at all. On average, everyone else's premiums went up 12.6%. So in talking to SURSA, it appears to be due to the work that we've done in-house in managing our own claims, resolving them, refusing to pay claims that we don't owe. So it's that it's the loss discount for having fewer claims that we paid out for this last year. So that's what they're projecting.
Great. And we continue to see the risk management position in helping us reduce those claims and also reduce our liability across, let's call it, other departments.
It's kind of a two different roles at this point. One is improving safety in the city. So we're doing that through the Brown and Caldwell project, outside consultant that they just completed their site inspections, and then they'll be working on safety protocols and improving safety at every facility in the city. So part of that is make it safer for our employees and citizens to reduce our claims. And then the other side is claims investigation and management. That when we do get a claim, we don't just write a check. We look at every claim critically, we evaluate liability. Then if we are liable, we do write a check. But if we're not, then we deny the claim. The usual response is people threaten to sue us, and we say, well, I mean, you do what you have to do, but we're not liable under state law, and if you sue us, we get our attorney's fees. And we find that generally ends the threat. So it's just a much more assertive role to protect city finances.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, that sounds great. Thank you, City Attorney, and also congratulations on your award.
Yep.
You want to tell us about that real quick?
Sure. The Metro City Attorneys Association, which is the Denver Metro City Attorneys, they surprised me, issued the award at the very end of last year, naming me the Denver Metro City Attorney of the Year. The nomination came in from Deputy City Attorney Victoria McDermott and talked about some of the challenges we had faced at the city and some of the legal analysis we completed with the recall elections and charter questions that were on the ballot last year. And so it was a surprise and but very cool. I've got a nice crystal award in my office now.
That's great. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't have anything else on this for City Attorney Niles, so I think we'll move on to our sales and use tax. Thank you, Director and City Attorney. Nevin, you want to read what we put in the report this year so we can have a basis to start the conversation?
I don't have the report in front of me, but
I can read it.
Yeah.
But I think you can make some comment on it for us too.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll read through it real quickly, just not to waste our time here, but I think it's important.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for doing a lot of the work on it this year. One second. So just as a background, I know most of you all know, but the voters approved the sales and use tax increase in 2023, which raised the local city sales tax by 30 basis points from 3.5% to 3.8%. And I'll skim some of this. I won't spend too much time on this, but I think it'll be helpful. I'd like us to get to a point where we can say, I think one of the big things last year, and Bill can help me out here, was that we wanted to have sort of some tighten sort of the metrics and the basis behind how we evaluated how these dollars were being spent. And that was both for 20 basis points for road maintenance, which is something we all agreed needed work. And I think council provided that as one of the primary objectives. And then also for alternative policing, which was 10 basis points of the tax. So in January 23, the City of Inglewood increased its sales and use tax from 3.5% to 3.8% following a public referendum passing the increase. The increase was the first time that Inglewood has increased a non-cannabis, in this case, related sales tax in 34 years. The increase was separated into two dedicated funds, as mentioned. One being to improve city streets and roads, and also to fund alternative policing services to address matters including homelessness, mental health, and addiction. It is important for residents of Inglewood to recognize that Inglewood sales tax is only a portion of the total sales tax that is paid by, we'll call it, consumers. In addition to the City of Inglewood sales and use tax, there are also state sales taxes, Arapahoe County, and then some other districts like RTD. I believe there's a scientific and cultural facilities district, which we have that information in the report. I won't bore you with it now. The City of Inglewood finds itself in a relatively unique position in comparison to other nearby localities. A relatively large percent of the city's funding comes from sales tax, which in this case, last year, I believe we did around 3.3 million, of which I know the first year, I think 990,000-ish was committed to alternative policing, and the remainder, which I have it here, was 1.9 plus million dedicated to the Public Works Department. I do have a question, most likely for you all, maybe Rita. In that for year one, which I guess was 2023, it was a full year. And so with that ballot measure being passed, were those numbers that were stated, that I just stated, but also were in the ballot language, were those the total amount that could be spent, or that was just used as an estimation?
So the first year, the dollar amount was set. Going forward, it's the percentage.
Got it, okay. So we actually had a favorable variance of around 300K in year one.
Yes.
Okay. And we expect that to, well, it won't matter because now all of it will be dedicated to those two fundings sources.
Or uses, I should say.
Uses, yes. I knew what you meant. Carrying on, part of the section that we wrote about was that, you know, we have a lot of a large non-resident population during business hours in Inglewood, which definitely gives us a nice benefit, called the medical district, and a lot of other businesses that are active here during the day but not at night, and also used by people from other cities. The committee recognizes the data has shown that in times of economic hardship, this would be a caveat. Sales tax are less reliable than other taxes and fees, such as property tax, and could result in levels of variation in city revenue. Obviously, with some economic downturn, that might be a small risk for us. We did ask the staff and the council to consider these adverse impacts, and That way, any increases in sales and use tax may influence, also have a negative impact on people, businesses, and industries that exist here. So I think those are the two caveats or negatives that could impact our sales and use tax collection and also this department funding. I will paraphrase here. The committee recognized the effort that City of Inglewood staff and City Council has put into utilizing these dedicated funds for the public and specific purposes. The committee asked for the town staff of City of Inglewood to take steps wherever possible to define, specify, and differentiate these dedicated funds from others, to specify that they have been used for the explicit purposes approved by the voters, and for the City Council to encourage the same. The committee believes that the additional clarity and communication around these funds and their documentation is critical to demonstrating to the public that the City of Inglewood and their council have been good and appropriate shepherds of public funding and taxpayer dollars. So I think that's kind of where we are on this. I didn't have anything specific to say, here's what we need to get out of this meeting today. I will add, and I'll open it up to discussion, that we are meeting with the police department March 25th and Public Works April 22nd. And I believe, correct me where I'm wrong, those were two meetings last year where we actually did have them provide their basis for these tax increases and their utilization of those funds. So we have a little bit of time to marinate on this, so to speak, but I was hoping that, you know, in the next 15 minutes or so, we could come up with some brainstorm ideas and also think about how, one, where we felt that presentations last year maybe didn't give us enough information to provide voters definitive uses and metrics, and also how we can maybe prepare for those meetings so that we can ask the right questions this year, and also provide those things to those departments before they come speak to us. Any thoughts?
I have a couple. I think regarding that question, I think one of the big things that we discussed is just adding another tab into the form, specifically looking at some of the critiques that I think we had, and I think we gave this feedback, so it might just be redundant to say it now, but that it would be nice to have one column that kind of covers the FTE and the relative number of FTEs for each line item, and then another column with descriptions of like the kind of work that falls under these funds that was done by each of those personnel.
Okay. I will add, I know last year that we struggled with this FTE section for alternative policing, just because it is such a gray area.
And I think,
right? And it's convoluted with, when they show up to an incident, other things that may be going on, right?
I think I think that's part of why I think having the description as a separate column, one, just for uniformity. I think one thing that we struggled with, if I remember correctly, is not all of the FTE breakouts were written the same way. And also sometimes all we got was the FTE breakout, and sometimes we got more or less description than others. So I think having that description column will help us understand, okay, this is why it's broken out this way, because they were working on this, and also I think having specific details about what they were working on that these funds are being attributed to will help us understand. I could see how, working in this area could potentially, right, be impacted by these areas, but simultaneously I can understand some of the struggle about working in a specific area and having to define that by is this specifically related to the language in this measure? And of course, there's always going to be some overlap, because it's not like these people it's not like these people stop working right the second that another task comes across their desk.
Understand. Let me read the language real quick. And Jenny, I thank you for pulling that up. Jenny did put up what we had from our June meeting. I don't remember the origin of this report. Jenny, can you tell us?
I think, well, I think staff provided it to BAC in terms of after we discussed what types of services the departments were providing relative to the dedicated sales and use tax. And so we provided this for your feedback to see, you know, since this was our first bite of the apple in reporting out how we spent, how the funds were spent in 2023. So at first, we noticed that there wasn't consistency in terms of, we would say, you know, one FTE at 10% or it was, I can't remember, or two people at 50% or something.
Yep.
So we tried to standardize that language a little bit.
Yeah, and I see here, so here are the line items that are in this report. I know it's kind of hard to see, but we had line item 6. This was 23 review. Police, all health network, we spent $263K, and that was for co-responders. And I felt like that was a really good dollar for dollar metric, because we could see here that these were all health providers who accompany officers on calls for service when dealing with individuals who may be struggling with mental health. Now, does that get us there? I don't know. But that one I feel like was fairly straightforward. And line number 7, police department program staff time related to homelessness, addiction, and mental health. This was noted as the estimated percentages are based on anecdotal and employee survey of how much time is spent on alternative policing related to homelessness, addiction, and mental health issues.
And that's followed by all the various staff time on the following line items.
Which is zone policing, impact team, lieutenant position, department resource sergeant, dispatch position, police desk officer, school resource officer, patrol officers, both on crisis and case management, and then code enforcement officer, and also park ranger. And again, we did this on a full-time employee percentage estimate. So I was hoping we could come up with some ideas as to how we could help them describe this. Go ahead.
I felt the presentation when Deputy Vance came in later in the year and kind of reviewed it, the presentation he provided. And I felt that that was a lot more helpful, at least to me it was, than reading the spreadsheet. It just provided, I think, a bit more context and maybe a bit less technical context, you know, or, you know, it's a little more friendlier. And I felt that that helped me understand a little bit better in the breakdown. And obviously the conversation and being able to ask him questions real time was helpful to kind of get that clarification. But maybe you know, I can't remember, we'd have to pull it up, but I can't remember off the top of my head, but it seems like the balance between that and the spreadsheet probably together probably help. You know, just like when we do the SIP, there's the PDF, you know, and then there's the spreadsheet, and you can kind of go back and forth, which was real helpful this year, the way everything was set up. I felt that kind of helped from kind of a committee perspective, at least, like I said, like for me it did.
Yeah, I totally concur. And I think the scheduling piece of just making sure that those presentations happen in time for us to be able to review and process that information is definitely a big piece of just making sure that we're able to really have the context that presentation provides before you know, looking over this and trying to figure out if these funds were spent in ways that the taxpayers might find agreeable.
I'd be interested to see not just our allocation, but also at least sample outputs or activities. Although that's not going to be totally comprehensive, it'd be helpful to see this is what is these are some of the things that are included in this hour breakdown. Is that something they provide?
So that's kind of the idea
Okay,
of the
great.
second
With the
column,
description.
because like, you can see here, like, column 17, they have like a little bit of that, but not every, row 17
I see.
has that, but not all of them had that.
Got
And
it.
so part of the idea is just creating a separate column for FTEs and having a dedicated column of the, exactly what you're speaking
Yeah.
to. Descriptions of the types of activities. Yeah.
It would also be helpful to potentially see some metrics. I know they collect a lot of department metrics. Perhaps this is already provided, but even around number of calls that are diverted to mental health, or number of times MRU is dispatched, percent of calls with a mental health co-responder, that sort of thing. If there's change over time, that would be ideal as well, but wouldn't have to be. I think that would help provide some context as well in terms of the sorts of activities that are taking place.
I agree with you. I think what we're gonna struggle with is having a realistic burden on our, in this case, police department, right? And to say, you know, what's realistic for you guys?
Yeah.
And so maybe an idea would be, hey, could you do it for a month or a week? And maybe we have to pick 2 times during the year, but maybe they would be willing to estimate the hourly load, which would give us maybe a little more accuracy.
Sure.
For, I hate to say it, the standard day. Because I know if our police department was here, they'd say, well, there is no standard day.
Sure.
Yeah. I'd be okay to see the metrics also, just even at the annual level compared to the previous years. I think most of what I mentioned, I've been in a police department presentation where they've presented at least some of those. So we wouldn't have to handpick exactly, but if they have some metrics around that, we could ask what they have available and ask for change over time.
And do you have any idea or examples of what those metrics would be?
I believe, I'll have to look. I have a slide deck somewhere from a presentation from them.
Okay, yeah, okay, so that will come.
Yeah.
In that follow-up meeting, because I don't believe I was there, was there any expectation going into this year of what type of, like, were there going to be any changes in how they were kind of anecdotally keeping track of this?
I don't recall, I don't feel like I felt there was just between, kind of, as you were saying, from a resource timing perspective, there's constraints there, and then maybe systematically what can be done, and I could be speaking out of turn here. But that seems to be what I remember, you know, it's just kind of what's capable, and where's that, you know, where's that cutoff of there being a return on being able to get that granular, you know, to it.
I'm just wondering if anyone spoke to it.
Yeah, it did come up. I'm just trying to remember it all now. I didn't bring my computer today. Can't pull up the notes, but it seems like it was along those lines.
I think the main like concrete thing that we asked for was breakout of those different positions and how that time is being used. I think we maybe discussed a few other things, but I think that was our big ask, was just like we've mentioned a couple times with that additional column, just more description of what these positions are actually doing.
So my idea, and we can agree or disagree, I was thinking, I mean, it'd be nice to have sort of an exhaustive list of what alternative policing is, and I think ultimately we really should ask the police department to provide 10 or 15 of those, and then maybe we look at those and say, okay, how does this make sense? Can we add some time to it instead of just saying on an employee basis?
By exhaustive list, do you mean list of things that are funded, or do you mean list of types of actions that the police does?
Situations that they have to deal with that fit into the alternative policing bucket, so to speak.
And I think they did have a slide to that effect kind of during their presentation, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and I'll need to look back in that before we bring this topic up again.
Yeah. Yeah, it seemed like they did. And I think part of where we were heading to, and this came up, and I felt that there was other folks from staff that kind of agreed, there's one of us saying, kind of doing that review from a committee perspective of saying, the yes or no, or pass or fail, as Steve had said, and giving that guidance. But I think there's also, what we were trying to represent is that, from a public view perspective, if they, somebody, other folks, we heard the First Amendment auditors that are, and other folks were reviewing it, and what is their interpretation of that? What's that, that public view of it? Because it's easier for us to get answers and understand it better because we're in the room and we're in the room with, with the police. But if folks decided to dig into the agendas or these audits and things like that from the public perspective, how would they really understand where that money is being spent, and how do you explain that, to the public?
Well, and I just call that audit proof, right? I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah, I think it's like a communication.
We're certainly subject to that, potentially.
Yeah, and I guess I was just seeing it as more of just kind of a communication. How do you tell the public that you're, this is how you're allocating it and things like that? Because they're not going to want to see, some of the into the details, things like that, like this, So I think it's just, this is all part of that conversation of what's that kind of friendlier version of it, I think is important.
I absolutely agree. And to me, I think we should be looking at every document like this that we're producing or reviewing as a committee, or, as a public communications tool, right? I want for the public to be able to look at this and be like,
exactly,
okay, that's what they spent my money on. I get that.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas, it can be a little confusing if you look at this, you're like, I don't know what that position is or does, or what this word means. And so if you have a description of the type of actions and things like that, I think that goes a long way. But there's certainly, I'm sure as we dig into this and get a few more years of these types of reviews under our belt, I think we'll also get better at kind of identifying like what may or may not be clear to the public about this type of spending and the budgets that we produce to represent that.
Yep. Yeah, just how we're using the money.
Do any of our city council members want to comment?
From probably more of a public perspective, looking at Public Works, it was cut and dried. They had the amount, everything was spent.
Yeah.
In some ways, my perception, and whether it's right or wrong, is I felt like all those numbers were backfilled. That we had the total amount that we could spend, and then we just figured out how we were coming up with that money. Which that is a little concerning to me.
I agree.
But I don't know how to fix that problem.
To that point, the city of Englewood's been doing things that a lot of municipalities haven't, to have like more of these alternative policing things in place for a long time, right? And so it can, I can see why there might be some confusion there too. And in some ways, right, that speaks to, hey, we're ahead of the curve. But in other ways, right, I can see from the public's view, like, what's changing, right? And I know we've had the city manager kind of speak to the intention and some of how the public was communicated about this, that it wasn't necessarily all about new services so much as just ensuring that we have these services, right, and prioritizing these services. But, again, too, especially if we're not clearly providing something tangible in exchange for an increase in taxes, right, we should make it very, very clear what the public are getting for their money.
So can I ask a question? Because when I first looked at this, at some point, is it possible, when we know how much money we have, is the police department perhaps hiring full-time employees that would be dedicated to do specific things that are definitely, fulfilling that? Like when that when you looked up there where there's 2 full-time employees spending 100% of their time, and then 4 full-time employees, is there some way to set up the system that we could actually hire employees that are designed to actually do this full-time? Then I think it would be more clear to the public.
I think that makes this whole establishment of time committed to various work descriptions, I mean, in some ways, it would really minimize that to the point that, yes, these are officers dedicated to alternative policing. And we certainly have the funds to be able to do that. Oh, question online?
Yeah, I think in answer to your question about whether council is comfortable with the way the money was spent, I think it's really the committee's prerogative to tell us that. I want to be really cautious in directing any particular comment on, you know, the audit process here, because the purpose of including that on the ballot, I believe, was to have citizens review and tell us whether or not they were comfortable with how that money was spent, and whether or not they believed that the money was spent for what we told them we were going to spend it on. I think fleshing out some of those concerns about 25% of this or 25% of that would be helpful in the future, because we need to, I think the outcome that's expected from council, without specifically directing the committee's work, would be, did we take this money in and spend it on what we told you we were going to spend it on?
Thank you.
Just to talk to the alternative policing, like dedicated personnel, I think the challenge to that would be you don't get to walk in with like a batch of like alternative policing issues that you need to like file through over the course of 8 hours. You can't just clock in and clock out. So like I think our police officers have gone through all this training in order to be able to respond to these things as needed. And if that is a 15-minute part of their day, that's just when that happens. And so I do think maybe I would have to see kind of, I think what we're trying to get to is a breakdown of what are the items that make this up and how much of each of these is taking up time. And then, you know, is there a time of day where we need to have someone or something like that? But I do think that's a very big stretch to try and put it all under kind of one person's activities. I mean, I think we could have like a supervisor maybe. I'd have to spend time with actual police officers to discuss that, but.
To that point too, I think one of the strengths of the way that our police department operates, right, is we've incorporated these practices into a lot of everyday police practices, right? Yeah. And I think telling, you know, an officer that's been working hard to try to incorporate alternate policing and try to make sure that they are incorporating this or spending time, you know, in areas that tend to have people that tend to be more prone to exposure to people having mental health issues or things like that, to say, okay, you're just gonna focus on other police duties. I think that kind of takes away from the coherency and the integration of these values that clearly the public care about into the overall police force.
I'm also comfortable with the partial allocation. I think I'm reiterating this, would like to see more of what those outputs or outcomes are. And we could start with a conversation with the police department to understand what they have, like what they do collect. I'll send this over, but from our Elevate Inglewood, I have at least some statistics that they have on the 911 diversion program, the MRU. So I think they definitely are collecting some of that, but yeah, that would just be one of my comments.
And again, sorry.
Can you share that with Jenny following the meeting?
Yes.
So we can circulate it?
And again, I think it's worth looking back at that presentation from last year, because I believe that there was at least one slide, maybe a couple, where they kind of talk more. I know they talked about it a little bit with their achievements, but they talked about in greater detail, and I think that was one of the reasons why having that presentation before we review this is helpful. But during that presentation, I believe they disclosed a lot more detail about what alternative policing looks like in Inglewood.
Okay, so we'll look at that too. I don't think we're gonna finish this conversation today, but my goal was to, go ahead, Jay.
Sorry. If we know that we're going to be having this discussion and want to bring up that presentation, appending it like we do with the other presentations, is that an issue at all, bringing it in?
Nope.
Oh, question online, city manager?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. To your point, Mr. Chairman, we can have the police come back and provide more information and get a little more granular. And also, if there are metrics or other, other information pieces, we're glad to start collecting that and then come back at one of your upcoming meetings as well.
What does
Great.
collecting that look like in your opinion?
Yeah, well, to the point that Laura was making about, some of the statistics we have on call diversion, on the MRU, on our co-responders, we are keeping stats on that. And so if you would like updated stats on that, I think most of the information is already collected. And then if there's more that you want, we can also collect that too.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna make a motion that we spend 10, 15 minutes on this next month. And I don't remember what else we had next month. We have, reserve policy. We're gonna start that too. But in the meantime, look at the prior presentation, look at the stats, and then I just ask if you spend a few minutes on it before the meeting so that we can just have an educated conversation about, hey, here's what we have. And maybe we can reach a point next meeting to say, okay, can we ask the police department for these things? And I'd like to give them something before the end of the year, and that maybe we can talk to them too before the end of the year, so that we can lock 24 in with some sort of metric and some reporting basis for city council. If that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay. I will circulate these notes. Laura's gonna send us the stats. I know the city has them too. And then we'll circulate that presentation from this year, earlier this year.
I'm happy to second that motion.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
What can a member of this committee do to prepare for next month's discussion on the reserve policy?
I knew you'd ask me that. Just give me 1 second.
And staff did prepare a reserve policy presentation to council last year, or maybe it was in 2022, that we could also add that.
Yeah, give me 1 second here.
To the agenda, yeah. So you can see what we've already discussed. Is there anything else you need?
Would it be,
Thank you, Jenny.
I just want to start ending each committee session with, what am I kind of walking into in the next
Great.
month?
Great. No, perfect. Quickly. The city's reserve policy investment policy set the unrestricted reserve to 16.7% of either operating revenue or expenditures with no official mechanism to grow or shrink the reserve. So that's the question. And that's something that we agreed to give city council some guidance on. A few considerations that were named in our report, and we may need to add to this or detract, but maintaining a current range of unrestricted reserve values. I think the range that we have is between 12 and 21.4%. Is that correct? Yes. Consider the rates of adjustment by comparison to other localities. What sort of mechanisms might come into play? and then provide a formula based on a fixed set of criteria to recommend reserve adjustments on a periodic basis. So that's the goal. Now, I don't know that any of these discussions we're going to be able to wrap up within that month, but I think for next week or next month, I would just ask that everyone do a little research on reserve policies at municipal level and see what sort of notes we can come up with. And please feel free to circulate them with the group prior to the meeting. And I'll do the same.
Thank you.
Welcome.
If I may, I think one thing that might be really helpful is to think about what sort of variables or factors should influence whether the rate is adjusted. I think that's a big kind of open question, and I think we've talked about a few different things. Like I believe that Councilmember Ward suggested looking at kind of data trends over time. I don't know if there was a specific number of years, but I think the recommendation was look at a period of several years and each year see how that is trending, and based off of that trend, that could be a big part of the criteria over whether or not the rate is adjusted. So as an example, like look at the past 3 or 4 years of data, and if over the past 3 or 4 years of data revenue has declined, then that might be a good indicator for adjustment, right? Or
sure.
You know.
Can the finance team, can you all point us to where we can review this at a high level for the city?
Yes, in fact, the data or the presentation that I'm going to send you, I think it might just be a couple years old, okay. But we can definitely refresh, at least get you to the current 2023 year-end amounts. But
yeah, I think that'll be sufficient. Enough that we could look at a 3 or 4 year period.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd be happy to send this to Jenny to disseminate as well, but the initial recommendation for the reserve comes from the GFOA. So I've been doing some research, and they in 2023 updated some of their advice and looked at the range. And so there's some resources I think are worth looking into. Their recent research about rethinking reserves and kind of pitching it more as a risk management strategy than a savings account. I love that. So I'd be happy to send that.
But both facets are certainly important.
Yes.
And also the general economic situation, among other city functions. So I mean, there's a lot to think about. And I think it's a pretty big bite to chew for city council. But
and I believe that's even one of the sources that we drew on in the
Thank you.
Yep.
So that is the Government Finance Officers Association. Okay. Lots of acronyms getting thrown out.
I know, you gotta watch this. I always ask if I don't know. So thanks for sharing that one. Okay, I don't have anything further. Members' choice? Unless you had anything further, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Just for members' choice, I think one of the things that we had talked about based off of feedback from the city council, including in our sales tax and just taxes discussion, was kind of a discussion of sales tax versus property tax, and what this what we propose to the council, what's better, and kind of looking at I think I think that there was a little bit of feedback from council, and maybe the council members present can provide more on that, but I think they wanted for us to get a little bit more into detail about not just saying, there are advantages and disadvantages to both, and we should consider those, but I think they wanted for us to maybe make a little bit more granular discussion, potentially in consideration of some of the upcoming changes, such as the county potentially raising sales tax, and the potential measure around parks that the public might be seeing.
And just how those various, in this case, taxes build up the total allocation.
I think so. I think part of it was, and again, I'd love for the city council members themselves to jump in here, but I think one thing that we might want to add to the schedule in the coming weeks, just to make sure that we're looping back to that council request, is just a discussion of sales tax versus property tax and the future of the city of Englewood, what we recommend leaning toward, or what sort of considerations we want to be considered. Do the council members have more specific feedback on what they're looking for?
I would defer to Councilmember Ward.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to offer on that. I mean, there's a fine line between council asking you and council directing you. I think this year is a good opportunity for the committee to shape its report and its work in the way that it wants. So, the question becomes what concerns you about the city? What do you want to tell us about? And what information do you think we would benefit from having?
Okay.
Sorry to throw it back in your face there.
No, that's great. That's what we want.
I do think, like, with the council expressing some confusion over what exactly we were asking or trying to communicate around, whether the city should be utilizing more property taxes versus sales tax, or kind of quantifying potential over-reliance on sales tax, I think that might be worth a discussion.
Okay, so we'll add that. So I did do some work I've started some work on the sales and use tax comparison, just at the state level.
Sure.
I also work in sales and use tax, and I work in property tax every day. But what I'll propose is that, if you don't mind, I'm happy to just take on the onus of just starting that comparison so that we can look at other metropolitans here in Denver.
Sure.
If that's agreed.
Yeah, that would be great.
And it could be, instead of we have a stance as a committee of, say, it could be just, here's when we think this comes into play versus, this tax versus, this tax, and maybe that's just kind of our stance on when we think those could be levered, when those levers could be pulled,
Sure.
It might help some of the discussion in here, so we're not like all having to come to one agreement, because we may not, and that's okay too,
Yeah.
So along those lines, there are cities in Colorado that are totally based on property tax and they have very few establishments where retail establishments. So, I mean, probably also you need to consider, if a city was based on a certain type of tax, what would happen if they totally switched also?
Sure. Well, and I think there's, if we want to expand it outside of the state, I think we can look to places like Oregon and Washington that go like the full extreme of like total reliance on one form of taxation or the other, right? But yeah, I certainly think just a comparison of our rates, and of course we have to consider our population, our relative commercial versus residential property and things like that, but
certainly the general consensus in tax is that a spread of tax is the most risk-friendly. But there are certainly, as Rita points out, a lot of different conditions. And I remember City Council member Ward did ask us about, when we provided the report, and mentioned that, hey, millage rates in Englewood are relatively low, and he's right about that.
Absolutely.
And so I'll put together sort of a snapshot of what this looks like in Colorado and how we compare, and then maybe we can branch out to compare to other states, but I'm happy to do that for next meeting.
And just for clarity, I think like the biggest point that I was trying to make in writing that is just, we want to be wary of over-reliance on any one form of taxation. So to your point, like really it's more just a matter of making sure that we have a relatively diverse stream of income and that we aren't over-reliant on sales tax, and then a recession comes and suddenly our income is slashed.
Sure.
I'd love to see comps on tax mix, tax burden as a percentage of income. That sort of stuff would be
I'll
helpful.
put it together so we can have the faces. Thank you. Anybody else?
Peter,
remember?
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Peter?
Yes.
Oh, hi, sorry, because I'm on audio only, so I was trying to wait for a moment to interject there.
Sure.
One of the things too, in addition to the prospective increase from Arapahoe County, I think we obviously need to factor in the results of the recent special session at the state level with property taxes.
I did a full analysis on that, actually, so I will share that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, lots of fun stuff there.
It only took me 2 months, so.
Recognizing the uniqueness too of Colorado being, voter directly approved as opposed to even many other states, I think that adds to the complexity of what can be proposed and what we can count on being approved.
Okay, anybody else?
I just offer member's choice. I know we had, kind of condensed the presentations a bit, for the departments. And I know today's presentations are usually the shorter ones anyways, but I will say that I thought that it went well. We got a lot of information, there to refer to and in the presentation, and spoke to and asked questions, and I thought it went well, and we had, quite a bit of time still left. And I know we're trying to reserve time to talk about these topics. So I just want to thank staff, and didn't get a chance to tell the director and city attorney that, but I thought it went well, and so thank you.
Absolutely.
Agreed, I agree.
I know you all are working on the communications, so thank you.
I agree, Bill, thanks. Okay, I think meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll email you out my notes.
Conversation with the city manager.